Hello SimCityers, today I'm going to help you with starting with your first 5,000 people in SimCity and deciding what kind of specialization you want to get into. Now this whole idea of specialization comes from the ideas of regionalism and small interlinked city units that the SimCity devs have spent a lot of time looking into and developing for SimCity. The possible specializations are mining, drilling, trading, electronics, culture, gambling and education. Now I'll be using beta footage as I go, and the only specialization that was available was gambling, but I'm not going to touch on that just yet for the first 5,000 sims because we need the necessary infrastructure before we start looking at the pros and cons of each specialization, but it's something to keep in mind that we need to think about as our city grows. Now the first thing that we're required to do is set up a bunch of roads. I tend to go with a small basic grid-like pattern. We're using medium density avenues that focuses around the town hall, and then spreading out further from that using lower density roads for housing and some small industry just to get things rolling, because I would like to focus on education as being my specialization for this city, because educated sims mean relying less on dirty industry and putting focus on such things as commercial and high-tech industry, which are less polluting, and you don't have to worry about trying to zone around these things, especially when you're trying to do a small compact city that I like to do. Now as we go, we're going to start wanting to consider what kind of sims we want to attract to our city. For me it's medium wealth sims because they'll most likely react best to a general education. They won't be as picky as high wealth sims, and they won't tend to want to consistently demand dirty industry to work in that low wealth sims will. Not saying that we shouldn't bring in low wealth sims, but we can always educate them up. But it's a lot nicer to get a balance between low wealth and high wealth, low wealth and medium wealth, rather than just trying to solidly attract high wealth who will make running a city a bit more difficult as they are quite demanding. One way to attract medium wealth sims is to think about the infrastructure that goes around their housing and what attracts them to your city. One way to look at this is parks. Nice and simple. Now there are several types of parks. There's low wealth parks, which are the $1 sign. There are medium wealth parks, which are the $2 sign, and then there's high wealth parks, which are the $3 sign. Now each park attracts certain kinds of sims. Naturally the high wealth parks will attract high wealth sims, and high wealth sims will demand high wealth parks. And that is something that can catch you out, because it will come up as a notification that the sims want parks, but they want high wealth parks, and they can be quite expensive and will push up land value, which can push out your lower wealth sims. And if you're living in a high density, sort of medium density, I should say, setup that I'm trying to go for, you can end up pushing out all the low wealth sims, and you're going to live in a society that is just pure high wealth and can be quite taxing, because you can't tax them that much because they'll tell you about it. So the solution for this is to put medium wealth parks in and around the houses that will draw in medium wealth sims and will allow for low wealth sims to move up to high wealth sims as they work and they become educated, and to put medium wealth parks around your businesses. Now this is quite important because medium wealth parks around your businesses will draw in medium wealth businesses, and they will serve medium wealth sims that you're drawing into your city. Now the same applies if you want low wealth sims. You put low wealth parks around the business area and around the houses. If you want high wealth, you have to put high wealth parks around the businesses as well as the sims and the businesses. So make sure if you're going to go with something, be consistent, because if you're inconsistent, you'll notice it that your businesses won't be successful. They'll be consistently closing down because they don't have enough shoppers. You'll have the demand consistently there for trying to draw in sims that won't be coming because you don't have the right kind of infrastructure. Now before we get too carried away with chucking parks everywhere, we need to look at our power and our water situation. Now I'm gonna go green on the city because it's probably the most sustainable and long term, because that's how you have to think when you start planning. You have to think long term, unless you just want to see as quickly as build as quickly as you can and then just destroy it with disasters. But for me it's thinking long term, and so I'm gonna go green with my power. Building windmills, you need to look where the arrows are going. That's where you want to find the higher winds. You want to build there. And for water, you want to look for the darkest blue on the water map, because that's going to give you the best access to water that's going to last your sims the longest. Now another thing to consider when you're building is zoning industry. Now when you zone industry, you'll notice that the wind arrows appear when you're zoning. Now this is because the factories produce smoke, and this smoke is not attractive. You don't exactly want to live in the smoky areas. So consider where you're building residential areas, and consider that in where the industry is going, where those arrows are facing, because those arrows are going to blow the smoke in that direction. If you build your residential houses behind where the smoke is blowing, as long as it's out of the way, they won't be as affected too bad by the lowered land value. But if that smoke is blowing over your residential houses and your commercial businesses, that land value will drop, your Sims will leave, and you'll have to demolish all those buildings and nothing will want to build there. And then you're going to have a problem with your Sims are empty. So once you've got your roads, your zoning, your water, and your power situation sorted, you can chuck in a town hall. Now chucking in a town hall is going to make your Sims pretty happy. That's going to get an immediate boost, and you'll probably draw a few more Sims in. Now this thing won't upgrade until you hit, I think, around 5,000 Sims. So we're going to aim for that at the moment, just to hit 5,000 Sims. So just chucking in a few more parks in those residential areas just to draw in more medium wealth, and we're going to start considering education. So education is really key. When you place your building, you can see around it that now, since this is the second beta filter that I'm using, that they've managed to supply us with little white outlines to show where the expansions were going, and by placing it in certain areas, which expansions you won't be able to expand to, which is really helpful because that was lacking in the first beta. So when we place our building, you want to place it and make sure that it can reach as many Sims as possible in its immediate field of view, and you're not going to be limiting yourself by preventing yourself from expanding the school later on. So that is something really important to consider. Now as our town grows, we're going to need to start bringing in other infrastructure before our Sims start to go crazy and complain. Most of this will include waste disposal, dealing with trash, dealing with health because of the factories. We still rely on factories because it's the biggest employer of Sims in our town at the moment. So because of that, air pollution is going to become an issue, and air pollution leads to germs, and germs lead to sick Sims. So we need to bring in medical center just to deal with sick Sims and just prolong the life, so our education becomes more useful and more long term. The longer your Sims live, the smarter they become, goes the theory. So we need to start thinking infrastructure such as medical centers, health, and dealing with trash and waste. Now if we just hover over a random Sims house, we can see that they are affected by a few things. There is density and there is wealth. Now wealth is affected by the type of income, the education, so that's kind of out of control at the moment just because it's beta and we don't have that length of time to influence those factors too much through different kinds of education, because we've only got the school available, and different types of employment because we're not allowed any high density commercial or high density industry. The only thing we can look at is density. Now density is influenced by happiness. Happiness is influenced by basically how good of a job you're doing as mayor, and is also that is influenced by the infrastructure available, such as parks, schools, a whole bunch of contributing factors. Now if you can increase the happiness of your Sims, you can increase your density, and ideally density is what I want because I want people to live in sort of medium density sort of arrangements around the city hall. So we need to consider that, and one way is through parks, another way is through police stations and fire stations, and those will make Sims happier, and they will naturally want to upgrade. So hopefully that gave you a rough idea of how to just start off in SimCity, just to get your first 5,000 population, and what to consider in what influences density and what keeps your Sims happy. And I hope that helped. Can you just leave a like, a comment, or just subscribe if you were that impressed by this video. And thanks for watching.